Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us for this webinar mini-series, Families for the Future. My name is Lizzie Parker, and I lead on our families outreach work here at Hope for the Future. Hope for the Future is a national climate communication charity which works to equip communities, groups and individuals to help communicate the urgency of climate change with their local politicians. We feel that it is vitally important that MPs and constituents have rich and challenging conversations about the climate crisis. And we also believe that local grassroots democratic engagement is a really essential part of this. We wanted to put on this webinar series, Common Home, Common Ground, to create a space where people can come together to have climate conversations from home. In this series, we're exploring all of Hope for the Future's outreach work. So we've already covered media and then MP engagement. This week, we're covering young families, and then coming up, we've got youth and faith. And there's more information about all the webinars on our Eventbrite page. This particular webinar series is part of our Families for the Future project, which aims to understand how Hope for the Future can best support parents to connect with their local MP. We have 3 short films to share with you this week, and we have developed these films around conversations and contributions from a range of parents, campaigners and MPs. And we're extremely grateful to everyone who's taken the time to send in videos, record interviews, and share their experiences and expertise with us. We are also really, really grateful to Elise Woodhouse, who has edited the films for us. There'll be an opportunity to discuss all the issues raised in the films with other parents during the last webinar of the series, which will take place in a live video forum moderated by Hope for the Future. And that webinar is going to take place on Friday, 19th of June at 10 a.m. So today's film focuses on the theme of raising children during a climate crisis. We invited Caroline Hickman and Joe McAndrews from the Climate Psychology Alliance to discuss the topic. Clover Hogan, founder of Force of Nature, also gave us her insights from the perspective of someone who has been campaigning on climate change since she was 11 years old. We also heard from parents within and beyond the climate movement about their emotions towards the climate crisis. We hope you enjoy the webinar.
My name is Marta and I'm a mum.
Hi there, my name's Clover Hogan.
Hi, I'm James. I've got a young toddler who's 3.
I'm a 20-year-old climate activist and the founder of Force of Nature, an organisation working with young people around the world to turn climate anxiety into agency.
I'm a member of a group called Parents for Future, and that was formed on the back of the youth climate strikes in support of those brave young people fighting for a climate-safe future.
I'm a lecturer at the University of Bath. I teach social work and I also teach on climate change. I'm a psychotherapist and I also work with a group called the Climate Psychology Alliance, and we're developing outreach to support people dealing with eco-anxiety.
I trained as a psychotherapist many years ago, and now specifically working around how do we support children in the face of climate crisis, and working with Caroline in the Climate Psychology Alliance.
I'm interested in climate change predominantly because I get around the city cycling, and I'm sort of concerned about the infrastructure around that, public transport and just general sort of levels of air pollution.
So I was very fortunate, and I grew up in beautiful tropical North Queensland in Australia, surrounded by the wild and the wonderful. So nature for me was never an other. It was part of my lived experience. It was part of the fabric of my reality. But that beautiful little bubble kind of burst when I was about 11 years old and started watching documentaries. First saw The Cove, which covers the annual slaughter of dolphins that happens in Taiji in Japan. And then I watched An Inconvenient Truth by Al Gore, really kind of opening Pandora's box on the climate crisis and the enormity of the challenge that faced us.
I think climate change scares me because it sort of seems to be quite a fundamental part of capitalism as it is now, and economic growth seems to require climate change. So it's quite scary, the thought that all the current structures kind of need it in order to function.
And at the time, I found it incredibly overwhelming, and I initially fell into this kind of pit of despair and helplessness.
Here we are in 2020, and our governments are still not ready to take bold and decisive action, and that's a huge concern, because it makes you think that if nothing has been done for 50 years, how can we achieve our goals in slightly over 20 years?
I suppose it makes you feel like addressing one small little piece of that might not have that much impact, or it's going to be difficult to fix the world by just doing your recycling.
Even after years of working in this space, of course, the kind of doomsday news and the research can really weigh you down, and it can still, even now for me, pull me into that pit of despair.
I think with that sort of that concern comes another, our mental health, but our children's mental health. How we support the young people in this situation of a catastrophic crisis. How we give them hope, how we encourage them, motivate them to look into the future.
My daughter said to me recently, she was asking me about college, she's 13, she was saying, do you think it's a good idea to go to university? And what might I do? And then she just said, if I've got a future, I'd quite like to enjoy it. Mm. I was brought up with, what are you going to be when you grow up? She's living with, am I going to grow up?
I know.
I can't, it is hard to bear that. It's hard to bear that.
For me, it's really important to be absolutely clear that this is not a pathology, this is not a mental health problem, this is not a mental illness, and that really eco-awareness, as soon as you become aware of the current climate and biodiversity crisis, it's natural, it makes perfect sense to feel anxious.
This phrase eco-anxiety is used a lot in the media and from people who are trying to shut down the conversation about climate change and who are wanting to guilt trip parents or activist groups for giving children eco-anxiety by talking about it.
I'm able to say, look, I can talk to you about what children have been saying to me for 5 years. So this precedes Greta Thunberg and the Fridays for Future movement. Children have been frightened about this for a long time.
Yeah.
So there is no way that Fridays for Future and Greta Thunberg are creating these anxieties in children. They're verbalizing them, they're speaking about them, they're making them more public, they're speaking out, and they're giving children permission to talk about these frightening things.
By guilt-tripping parents and activist groups, action groups, that they are causing children's anxiety and even trauma by mentioning this, thereby putting the blame on the people actually trying to help children rather than people causing or refusing to act on climate crisis.
Eco-anxiety is not something that should be driven underground or fixed. That people struggling with how they feel about what's going on in the world does not mean that there's something wrong with you. It actually means that you're responding emotionally, healthily to what's happening, but also that you're paying attention to how you feel. So how is this showing up in families and with children that you're aware of? This anxiety about climate?
Anxiety comes out. Not many children, especially younger children, are not going to say, oh, Mum, Dad, I just need to let you know that I'm feeling rather anxious at the moment. I've got these butterflies in my tummy and I've got some existential dread about what's going to happen. I think you might die and maybe I will as well.
I'd be quite grateful if adults could articulate it. So to expect children to articulate anxiety does not make much sense, really, does it?
No. So it comes out in behaviour that is unsettled, that is provocative, that is disruptive, that is loud or is quiet. It comes out in not wanting to go to bed.
Yeah.
And a child won't say, I don't want to go to bed because I'm too scared lying by myself. What they'll do is they'll just say, I want another story, I need a wee, I need a biscuit, I need this, I need you, I need that. Or it'll come out in them being overwhelmed in their body and hitting out and becoming violent or shut down. I mean, it looks like both ends. And what I'm describing is behaviour that we've been taught to see as naughty. It's not naughty, it's communication. When children do behaviour that is difficult, uncomfortable for us, they're communicating that they need help.
We've got to look under the surface, because there's a surface communication, and then there's the communication under the surface.
What children need is adults who are interested in their emotional life, who are able to be curious and listen and care. And this is the complicated bit, of course, bear those children's feelings themselves.
Right.
How do we sit with a child and bear what they are frightened of or what they're thinking without trying to shut them down or to fix them? If children are having very difficult feelings and we tune into that because we love them, then we're going to feel those difficult feelings. So it comes back to, how do we regulate our up and down feelings? How do I learn how to keep calm in the face of my child's tricky behaviour, my own feelings, the climate crisis that is churning over and over, that I wake up to every day?
I would love us to be having that conversation with the child, rather than the parent feeling that they've got to be this sort of, brilliant, perfect therapist plus parent, right? That you're actually articulating what's going on for you in order to teach the child how to regulate their own feelings, how to cope with their own feelings. The important thing is about having the conversation with your child and not necessarily having all the answers. Not necessarily being able to kind of pull the rabbit out of the hat and go, here's what we have to do.
As difficult as those conversations are to have, we must have them. It's essential that we speak to our young people about these problems. I was walking with my 6-year-old cousin, Jude. We'd never before talked about climate change, and completely out of the blue, she turned to me and said, what's the deal with climate change, and is there going to be a planet for us to live on? My first instinct was that I wanted to wrap my arms around her and tell her that everything was going to be absolutely fine. And I think that's our instinct always, right? We want to protect our young, we want to protect the vulnerable, but it's not the most important thing that we need to do in those moments.
One of the really hard things for us as adults, which is to recognise and come to terms with in some way the fact that we can't protect our children from this.
No.
We can't avoid this, and somehow think that today we have to protect our children by finding ways to talk to them about these painful things rather than avoiding them, because that's about preparing them for the world in which they're going to be living. That's preparing them for the realities of the world that they're going to be facing and inheriting.
We can't really pull the blanket over our eyes any longer, and in fact, when we do, it's incredibly problematic because it can lead to a deep-seated resentment when young people feel like they've been kept in the dark, and when they feel like they've been deprived an opportunity to act on their future in the interest of our future, which is ultimately what this is about.
I really worry, Jo, about what's going to happen in 3 years or 4 years or 10 years when our children turn around to us and say, why didn't you talk to me about this? So I know it's painful and I know it's scary, but I really come back to this idea that we've got to find ways to tell our children the truth and not avoid this and not get over-focused on the positives or over-focused on the negatives. It's not all doom and gloom. There is good things happening and there's good things we can do. But we mustn't do that at the expense of not talking about the reality.
Yeah, I agree with you.